Howdy, friends. Welcome to the Fort Worth Property Management Podcast. I am your host, Mason Arispe. I am the Operations and Business Development Manager here at First Choice Property Management in Fort Worth, Texas. This is episode 1 of the Fort Worth Property Management Podcast. We are super excited to roll this out for you today. This episode is going to be pretty much an introduction to me as your host, my story, where I came from, and our goals with this podcast. And then for the second half of the podcast, we are going to bring on our first guest star, and that'll be the owner of our company. And we will bring him on, learn a little bit about our company, our philosophy, and stuff like that. So we're super excited to roll out this first episode for you. So let's jump right into it. Like I mentioned, my name is Mason Arispe. I work here with First Choice Property Management. I have worked here for almost 3.5 years. Initially as the Business Development Manager, which means I deal with all new business coming into our company. And now I am the Operations Manager, overseeing operations on the management end. But I want to give the audience a chance to get to know me a little bit. And so I am 28 years old. I am initially from West Texas, a town called San Angelo. So shout out to anybody in San Angelo who's currently listening. Went to San Angelo Central High School and then moved up to Lubbock to attend Texas Tech University. So I lived in Lubbock for about 5 years. I attended Texas Tech with a pre-med major with the intention of going to medical school. Towards the end of my time in Lubbock, I was preparing to apply to medical school and then graduated at the end of 2019. Ended up moving back to San Angelo in 2020 whenever COVID hit. So during that time, I was studying, I was taking the MCAT, I was applying to medical schools, and during my first round of applications, I did not get into med school. So I was like, okay, it happens every once in a while. I can build my resume, pad a little bit more, and then reapply next year whenever applications open back up. So in the meantime, obviously, I had to go to work in San Angelo. I ended up working at a bail bonds office that is a close relative of mine, which I started working at, just helping out in the office because, funnily enough, during COVID, people were still getting arrested. So the bail bonds office was still open. So I worked there with my Uncle Louie. It's actually where I met my wife, so thank you, God. But worked at a bail bond office, and I don't know if listeners really know too much about the business end of bail bonds, but the way that it works is that you're able to post bonds for people who go to jail by using collateral that you own instead of cash. And so as I worked at this business, I learned a little bit about holding assets, acquiring real estate, and using that to build wealth in different ways. And so extremely thankful to my Uncle Louie at Concho Bail Bonds, who was able to teach me the value in owning real estate, and he just kind of planted the seed. And so I got into learning a lot of different avenues in real estate, and it piqued my interest at that point. And so I looked around in San Angelo, not too many opportunities to learn the in and outs of real estate. I am very much a type of person who wants to learn the intricacies of any business or of any huge transaction like that before jumping right into it. And so a friend of mine, Daniel, and I ended up moving up to Dallas, Fort Worth, right at the end of 2021. I guess at the end of this year, I'll have lived here in Fort Worth for 4 years. My goal was to move up here, get into real estate, and learn the ins and outs of real estate investing. I wasn't sure if I was going to be a wholesaler, a fix and flipper. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I know that my end goal was to have rental properties. And I don't know why it never clicked to me that if I want to learn real estate investing, to go to a property management company. It just didn't click. That shows you how little I knew about real estate investing when I first moved up here. But I found the business development role here at First Choice that has truly taught me so much more knowledge that I couldn't be more thankful to have now. Looking back at Mason 4 years ago, I couldn't imagine that I would be in the position that I am now. So super excited to share all of that knowledge with you. That's kind of my journey of how I got here, but a little bit about me, right? What do I like to do on my free times? I'm a big golfer, so on the weekends, if I have free time, I love to go out with some of my buddies, play golf all throughout the Metroplex. Outside of that, my last year has been tied up in planning a wedding. I recently got married to the love of my life. Her name is Cameron. So sorry, ladies, no matter how great this podcast sounds, I'm off the market. We got married at the end of August 30th. So for the past year, every weekend has been tied up with showers, events, traveling, planning. I mean, it's been crazy. So not too much free time, but now we love sitting on the back patio, enjoying coffee in the mornings. It's supposed to be fall right now, but it's a little warmer than we like. So as it cools down, we'll enjoy having coffee on our back patio. We love going to the movies. Tuesdays is our movie day where we like to go do the $5 movies at Cinemark. I'm a big Marvel guy, so we love going to watch Marvel movies. My favorite superhero is Spider-Man. Always has been and probably will be for a while. I love watching the TV show Friends. Cam and I are currently watching How I Met Your Mother. We have 2 dogs, an Australian Shepherd named Phoebe, and a Chiweenie named Tucker. As you can tell, huge Friends fan, naming my dog after Phoebe. I mean, come on now, you have to do it. That's a little bit of a look for our listeners into my personal life, who I am, but let's shift towards why I'm so excited to start this podcast, because it's such invaluable information that I take for granted because I do this every single day. I'm in this job and I forget that the homeowners that call in, their job every single day may be accounting, or maybe a teacher, or construction. That's what you do every day. You know the ins and outs of that, but you don't know the ins and outs of property management or of real estate investing. And so that is our goal with this podcast, is to give you an outlet that you can put on in your car, in the mornings, just have on in the background, but that can also provide some practical information that you can implement whenever you decide it's the right time to invest, right? And so whether you have 0 properties, you already have purchased a house, or you have a real estate portfolio, this podcast is going to be applicable to you, and we will give you actionable items that you can go out into the world, look at properties, and apply every single day. So I want to give you guys a sneak peek into what the Fort Worth Property Management Podcast is going to be. It is going to be some practices that you can take action on today with your rental properties or your house. It will also be bringing on guest stars to speak about their expertise. So maybe successful real estate investors with the big portfolio, some of our trusted vendors like plumbers, HVAC guys, hearing from insurance agents, mortgage agents, different people like that. So we may bring on guest stars to talk about specific topics. I will also give you a sneak peek into some of the topics that we've chosen that may be solo podcasts. So here are a few topics that we have in the pipeline that will be coming at some point. Property management is a partnership. Thinking of, instead of having a service provider, hiring a partner to manage your properties. How to reconcile a security deposit. What is normal wear and tear and what is not. Applicant screening philosophy. The ins and outs of the Texas Property Code. Evictions. Best practices to avoid them. And then also the process of completing it if you ever have to do that. Identifying the best upgrades for long-term ROI, return on investment. Investment strategies like the BRRRR method, buy and hold, fix and flipping, house hacking, stuff like that. All of these are topics that we have in mind for episodes that we're going to bring to you, okay? And so that is going to be what this podcast is initially. As our listeners provide feedback, if we need to make changes, if we need to post more frequently, we will adjust as we need to. But we are going to rely on feedback from you. We're very thankful for each and every one of y'all tuning into the podcast. We want to make this a great show from y'all, and the best way that we know how is to take feedback and learn from you guys. So if you have any feedback, please leave it in a comment below. All right, now we're going to head over to our next segment where we're going to bring on the first guest to the Fort Worth Property Management Podcast. This guest is an entrepreneur. His family has about 50 properties under their belt. He's been a licensed Texas real estate agent since 2009, has had his real estate broker's license since 2015. He has his residential management professional designation and his master property manager designation. He is the current owner of First Choice Property Management and oversees both the management and the maintenance departments of our company. Please help me welcome Rob Kazen. Rob, it's so great to have you on today. Thank you so much for coming and joining us and all the listeners here on the Fort Worth Property Management Podcast. We're happy to have you.
Jason, thanks for having me. And thank you for taking this role of being our host of this cool podcast that we're rolling out for our company.
Of course. I'm super excited. I'm very thankful for everything I've learned over the past few years. And so we're excited to pass it on to our listeners. And so what I informed them of earlier in the episode is that this first episode is pretty much going to lay the foundation and give insights into our personal lives, into our professional lives, and just give them an idea on who this information is coming from. That it's not a random Joe Schmo with no real estate experience, that we do have some credibility under us. And that's why I thought it would be perfect to bring on the person who's taught me everything to kind of help lay the foundation. So I have a few questions here for you. We'll jump right into it. I kind of want to start off a little bit more personal. So for all of us listeners who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and give us some insights into your life.
Yeah, not a problem. Let me go into how my family found here and built our roots in Fort Worth. My dad, my mom, and my brother and I moved to Fort Worth 40 years ago. I was born on a United States Air Force Base in Madrid, Spain. My brother Sam was also born on a U.S. Air Force Base in Wichita Falls. My brother currently is a lieutenant fireman here in Arlington, Texas. My dad spent 25 years in the armed forces, mainly in the Air Force. He ended his military career by retiring from the station here in Fort Worth, which many of us knew it by its old name, which was Carswell Air Force Base. And to be dead honest, I'm so glad my dad decided to retire here and raise my brother and I. Fort Worth has been an incredible place for our family. And that all started with my dad deciding that this was home. My dad started the company 35 or so years ago. And I was involved young, not in any big roles or anything. A little bit of hands-on with the properties because my dad would, quote-unquote, hire me. I'm not sure I even got paid. But I would have to clean out some of the units after a tenant would leave. And some of them left them nice and some of them not so nice. So I was able to kind of endure those aspects of the business early on. I didn't continue in the business when I was younger. I had different aspirations. I guess you can kind of say I was rebellious like many of us when we were the age that I was. And so I ended up spending most of my early work life in the auto salvage industry. I called my dad up one day and asked him if I can come to work for him, if I got a real estate license, working in a property management company. He said yes, and that was back in 2008. Well, if we all remember what was happening in 2008, our market was in a free fall. A lot of hard times for a lot of people, and that's where I got my on-the-job education, was in that market, just head on. Very strange times for everybody, and it was quite the trial by fire.
Nice. And a lot of people in the industry now have never been through a market like that. So to have started in that and learn how to maneuver through that must have been incredible. And then fast forward to 2020 to experience a market like that, it must be completely different, right? I mean,
Yep.
a
Yep.
market increases so much, and now agents are having to figure out how to deal with a little bit of a slower market that is not just throw your property out there and find a tenant immediately, right? So, brand new. Well, Rob, tell us about some of your hobbies. What do you like to do whenever you're not at work?
It's pretty simple. You can sum it up in about three activities. One, I love my family. I got two beautiful kids, a daughter and a son, and then my wife, who actually works for our company and has for quite some time now, and she's been serving in a pivotal role in our organization. But outside of that, I love fishing and I love working on car projects and things like that.
Awesome. That's great. One of our first outings was to Possum Kingdom Lake. He took me on a boat, took us fishing, and it's honestly, that was within my first 3 months of working on the job, and it brought us immensely closer. So it was great. I'm forever grateful that I got to get out there and catch some good
Hey,
fish.
let's not forget you caught the biggest fish that day.
I did. That I did. It's probably my personal best. But yeah, filleted it up. Tasted really good that evening, huh?
Good times.
All right. Awesome. Well, I'd like to just start with how First Choice began. Can you tell us a little bit about that initial story? Even though you weren't too into it at the beginning, I'm sure you witnessed it firsthand. So tell us a little bit about how First Choice began and then how you've seen it change and grow since you've taken over.
Of course. Started small. It was just my dad and one assistant property manager and about 50 homes. My family roots are actually pretty deep on the property management scene. I'm a fourth generation property manager. My family had owned a real estate asset that was in California back in the 40s, 50s. I believe it was around that time frame, which we continued to own it until the late 80s. So that was eventually sold through a 1031 exchange, and we bought real estate assets here in Fort Worth back right as my dad retired. That was part of his retirement plan as well.
What was it that was sold in California? Was it a single family home or what kind of asset was sold in California?
No, it was actually a 12-story building with a storefront on the bottom, and
Oh.
floors above it. The floors above it were apartment spaces.
Okay. And they sold that and purchased what type of properties here in Fort Worth?
We ended up using the funding from that sale to purchase a handful of fourplexes, a handful of duplexes, and a handful of single-family homes.
Okay. Awesome. And that was back in the 80s. And so are those the initial properties that your dad began managing?
Yes, those were exactly the properties that my dad started cutting his teeth on. So back in the day, when my dad was managing with either himself or one other assistant, there was no tech. It was pretty much 3x5 cards. Then eventually spreadsheet programs came. And then back then, property management was like the Wild West too. There wasn't too much regulation. So it was just a different game than the game and strategy that we play today in property management. We did transition from basic management software and phone calls to a real operation whenever I began working with First Choice. We brought in digital inspections, online portals for tenants and owners, and eventually a full service maintenance arm.
So it sounds like initially it was all pen and paper, word of mouth. There's not a lot of documentation. Fast forward 30 years, everything is documented. Everything has to have a picture. Everything has to be written down, contracts, and then the whole real estate industry that regulates specifically rental properties, right?
Yes, of course. And then, of course, we've got to align our operations with the Section 92 of the Texas Property Code. So all that's followed to a T.
So I want to go back real quick to when you migrated over to Fort Worth. All of these properties were purchased in Fort Worth. Your dad began with managing those. Do you happen to know what piqued his interest in to start managing for other people?
There wasn't a lot of property management companies in the area at that time. So if somebody was moving out of state, a lot of our business back in the day was because of, his military service and just connections here So there was a lot of military service members. They had an asset here in Fort Worth. Of course, knowing my dad, knowing that he retired, he's in real estate now. So my dad got a lot of phone calls from that connection right there.
Wow. Well, he stumbled into an incredible business, so that's awesome. And so I know now every week we have our Tuesday meetings. We sit down and everybody on our team listens to our core values, our company vision, and we all make sure that we're aligned with that. So think back to about 35 years ago. What was the early vision to the company? What was there one?
So there wasn't one defined, but thinking back, it was basically practice what we preach. So the way that we manage our family's homes and the success that we've found in doing it, it's basically a practice of tier one standards on all of our personal assets that we have under management. We know the success this strategy brings, and we align ourselves with the clients that share this same philosophy. So the tier one mindset, we figured it out over the years. It's quality really attracts quality. So the game is to set your property up to attract tier one tenants. This may require additional expenses, depending on the age and condition of your asset. That was the basic strategy back then, was like, if we're finding success on our own rental properties, then we can definitely bring this over to our clients to help them find that same success. Fast forwarding to now, our current vision, we're on a mission. We want to set the standards for what a good property management company looks like here in Fort Worth, not just to be another company collecting rent. We want to be the best. We strive to be the best. We do stumble every now and then. We're all human. Everybody makes mistakes, but I'm the first one to step up and make things right every time. Just do the right thing. So, that's our vision, right? Current vision.
Awesome. And I mean, we say this every week, right? The company vision is to be a time-tested brand and provide local real estate management and maintenance services in Fort Worth, Texas, right? That is our vision, and arguably that hasn't changed in 35 years. That's still a great way to do it, and Rob and his family still currently own all 50 of those properties. I myself have one rental property. All the property managers are real estate investors. We all have rentals. So at First Choice, it's very easy for us all to practice what we preach. We don't want to be hypocrites, but we will be the first to take accountability if something messes up, right? That's kind of what our foundation is and our values as a company. And so when your dad initially started this company, there weren't very many property management companies, right? And so word of mouth was easy to get him properties to bring on to manage, but now it's the opposite. You can throw a rock and find a management company in Dallas, Fort Worth, right? So in your opinion, and you may be biased, but in your opinion, what sets First Choice apart from all the other management companies in DFW?
Deep local roots, for one. Of course, real people, boots on the ground. We're not a national brand that's trying to be local. We are a local brand. We actually see the homes we manage. I mean, like every single one. We have boots on the ground, looking at them, going to the properties, checking on them, all that. I know there's management companies out there, not to say that can't be successful, but they're just not in town. But we are. So, again, we're boots on the ground here. We develop strong relationships with our owners and with our tenants. We understand that the relationships are the foundation of having a successful management of any real estate asset that's a rental. And we do turn down properties that really don't fit our standards, or if we're not aligned philosophy wise with individuals that may call up here, we're happy to discuss and then help them out, find another management company that maybe more aligns with their style of management if they don't align with ours.
Yeah, the model of a property management company is the more units you manage, the more income you bring in, the more money in your pocket, right? And so you just mentioned you're not trying to grow to be the biggest. Is there a reason why you want to stop at a certain door count?
Yeah, I think you lose track of a lot of things when you're just setting your goals to be, that lofty. I have no interest, again, in being the biggest. We do want to be the best, so we want to utilize that control and stay focused on our customer service, on our relationships, all that game.
It sounds like the more quantity you have, the potential to kind of suffer with the quality aspect. If you have too many
Yeah,
houses to look after, you can't really be boots on the ground of every single one of them.
I'm not saying it can't be done, but you definitely stretch yourself out thin.
Okay. Yeah, and I've seen it firsthand. I don't think I could. We're in Fort Worth right now. We're about an hour and 20-minute drive away from Frisco, one of the nicest parts where everybody wants to move to, but we don't manage in that area. I don't think I could set aside a few hours to go over there just because we forgot to put a sign in the yard. And so it's one thing for door count, but also your service area.
Yeah, we can touch on that. Because I grew up here in Keller. When my dad retired, I was 4 or 5 years old. I, just about to start kindergarten, and we were in the Keller ISD area. So North Fort Worth, Keller. These are our stomping grounds. Hey, Keller peeps. And again, because these are my stomping grounds, we want to keep our service area tight. We do manage all of Tarrant County. We go outside of Tarrant County, just barely east of Grand Prairie, Tarrant County border right there, and then a little bit outside on the west border. We'll go up into Weatherford. North, we'll go up into the Argyle area. That's Denton County, and then south of us, we'll hit a bit of Johnson County. That would be like South Burleson.
And as Fort Worth grows a little bit, it's okay to kind of fluctuate with it, pick and choose where we want to manage on the outskirts, right? But it's so different than driving an hour and a half through city traffic at midday or something. That's completely different. So we do have a different style than most management companies, and we don't jive with everybody, right? Our company is not the best fit for every homeowner who has a rental property. How would you best describe our management approach?
I think if you try to build your management company to where you're for everybody, you're somewhat of a chameleon. So we didn't want to do that. We wanted to focus on what we believed produced a successful management scenario between tenants, owners. That's being fair to both parties. The type of tenants that we want to attract are the tier one tenants. In order to attract the tier one tenants, your property has to be set up for tier one standards. If we want to attract the 800 credit scores, we want to attract the good job income earners. We want to attract just all in all the better end of the renters to increase our percentages of success. It all starts at the property, at the condition of the property, and sometimes that's scary for a lot of investors. If you've got short-term investor mindset, then you're likely going to be, analyzing every penny that you spent, which is, I understand it, but there's got to come a point where that's going to work against you in the long game. And a lot of our philosophy has to deal with, what's your asset going to be like down the road. So we don't have these horse blinders on all day long. We're looking at the big picture. That is the long game, and that's our strategy. What can we do to these properties today that creates a better scenario later on down the road?
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your insight. It's incredible to learn about a company that has been around in the same area successfully for over 30 years. That's 8 years longer than I've been alive. So now I want to pivot towards some practical advice for either potential landlords or current landlords who are listening in right now. So somebody with this much experience under their belt, what is the biggest thing landlords misunderstand about property management?
I guess one of the biggest things that gets thrown around all the time is, all we do is maybe collect rent. We collect checks and we send checks, and, that's not that straightforward. There's definitely a lot of other activities that goes into managing properties at a level that we do. And the truth is, property management is about protecting investments and building relationships. So if you're not in tune with identifying with your tenant, understanding that the tenant needs to, the enforcement of the lease is super important. There are some gray areas in our leases that, have to be navigated through. Not everything's 100% figured out. So it's up to the individuals to, work things out when there's problems. So the biggest thing we found out early on is, if you're not considering the other side of the tail a little bit, then you're going to have a soured relationship. And that can be with your tenants. That could be with your clients. Pretty much anything and everybody in life's for us all revolve around a relationship. So if you truly want success with your tenancies, that relationship matters.
So it honestly sounds like a property management company is a very important mediator in making sure that both parties are happy and that the house stays occupied. Everybody's happy when it's occupied. Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. So that we can make this applicable to all types of listeners, what advice would you give new landlords or investors?
Well, a lot of the problems that we're seeing nowadays, or at least in this era, and it's happened before in markets, but this one in particular, since it's fresh, is we had a lot of clients or potential clients that just bought at the end of a just volatile market. Everything was going great. People were buying properties, and then eventually they got to the point where maybe they weren't worth what they were paid for them at the time. Only to find out to put it out on the market, can't get the rent that they were wanting. So get educated before you buy. Understand the markets. Don't just see an ad saying buy real estate in Texas. It's so hot, you're going to make a ton of money. Get educated before you buy.
Okay. Yeah. And so now, Rob, let's say that we do have a landlord who realizes that they're just not cut out for being a landlord. What should people look for when choosing a property manager?
The biggest two things that come to mind are communication and accountability are pretty much everything. You can get a lot of property management companies, if it's just one person and depending on their size of book, maybe they can't communicate as much as a property management company that has some more employees or has more structure in it that has that ability to reach out and just inform clients on what's going on with their property. And again, we're not impervious to making mistakes here, but we always look at our mistakes and we always improve upon them. So communication, accountability, we're always accountable for sure.
Yeah, and doing it the right way the first time, because there's a lot of people who just like to see the smallest number and just choose to go that way. Rob, you and I, we talk with homeowners every day who are either in a pickle, they're in a bind with the tenant, they have something going on at the house that could have been avoided. And so what is the biggest mistake you see owners make when they're self-managing and when they're the landlord?
There is quite a bit of desperation when you have a property, it's empty, you've got expenses going out, you got mortgage, taxes, insurance, all that. It's just hemorrhaging out the door. So you want to get it rented. So I would think that a lot of landlords that are self-managing, they just grab onto the first person with cash. And that's absolutely one of the worst ways that you could probably do that type of management. All right, this is a great question. So what we found is, having a property that's empty, you get put in desperation mode in a sense because you're hemorrhaging money on mortgage on it. You got taxes, you got insurance. Maybe you just spent a boatload on expenses on the property. You're wanting a body in there because you want to get some cash in return. I would imagine that a lot of landlords, they get desperate. So they might take the first person with cash, which is a very bad strategy. If you're not doing a thorough application screening, background check, then you're going to miss a lot on the particular individual that might be applying for your property. We go through everything. We're starting with our application process. The regular background checks. We're checking their jobs. We're checking their rental history. Those are the main three things that everybody checks. But we dig in even deeper. We're looking into Facebook. We're looking for tenants that might say that they don't have a dog, but yet yesterday they're posting on Facebook, oh, my 3 puppies, I love them, I just got them, and now I'm going to get a new house, and yada yada yada. So we get in there and we kind of look for stuff like that to figure out the legitimacy of what the tenant prospect is putting down on their application.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, because half of it is desperation, the other half is emotion. Well, you have an empty house that you're paying for, and then all of a sudden somebody wants to move in. Somebody's going to be paying the rent. It's not just going to be me. You get so excited, you're ready.
Excitement.
You have to be able to take that out and say, okay, let's pause, submit this application, and you have to protect yourself 6 months and a year in advance, right? Because you can't just think about that next week or two that they're about to move in. You have to be able to protect yourself all the way through the lease. And that's what a lot of homeowners forget, is you get so excited that somebody's about to move in, you're about to have a body in the house, and in reality you're going to be regretting that decision in a few months. Well, shoot, Rob, I really appreciate you coming on the first episode of the Fort Worth Property Management Podcast. This will not be the last time that Rob joined us on an episode of the podcast. So right here we have a guy with 16 years of experience under his belt. Both of us are a part of a company that has 35 years of experience here in the Fort Worth area. If there are any questions that we missed that you want to hear answered by Rob in future episodes, please leave us a comment underneath where you're listening to this podcast. We would be more than happy to make a video on it. We will be checking our comments on the videos and on the podcast every week. Guys, we're going to be putting out the podcast on multiple different platforms. Make sure that you share to anybody that you know who could benefit from any of the questions that we answered today. Make sure that you subscribe so that you can get alerted every time we drop a new episode. We will be uploading episodes every other Wednesday with new content. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we are so happy to be starting the Fort Worth Property Management Podcast with you guys.
Mason, I want to say one thing. Thank you for taking this role on being the host of this podcast. You're destined to do great things. I can't wait to see some of the interviews and some of the episodes that you have in doing this for Fort Worth Property Management. And I also want to say that we love Fort Worth, and we definitely love this industry. And we're here to keep setting the bar higher for everybody, for our owners, tenants, and clients that we serve. Thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those words, Rob. We appreciate you a bunch, and we appreciate everybody for tuning in to episode 1 of the Fort Worth Property Management Podcast. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Talk to you next time.